Welcome to the Marketing for the Culture podcast, powered by the African American Marketing Association. Each week, we'll bring you an insightful conversation from some of the best experts in our industry on how to advance our career. Join the collective of Black marketers across the world, advancing their brand as we work towards creating a collaborative community. Hey, good people. Welcome to the Marketing for the Culture podcast, powered by the African American Marketing Association. I'm your host, Michelle Gomez, and today we have a panel where we're going to discuss revenue operations. And I have Jasmine, Aisha, and Dwamian with me. Welcome to the show. How are y'all doing today?
Doing great. Good. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Doing great. Thank you for asking.
So please have everyone introduce themselves, a little bit about your background and what you do currently.
I'll start. My name is Jasmine Powers, and I'm the CEO of Jasmine Powers Multimedia. In the shortest terms, I'm a product marketer turned RevOps manager, and I provide consulting on like go-to-market strategy and the rest of the customer lifecycle. And I'm working primarily with digital agencies and MarTech and sales tech companies.
Cool.
Next.
Yes, please.
I'm Asia Corbett. I am head of RevOps and community operations at RevGenius. I have a pretty operational background, so this is like right up my alley and somewhere I wanted to go because revenue operations is important to me and community is important to me. And being somewhere where I can build those two things together was important. And so I am going to be building out our entire revenue operations function there, as well as the community and making sure that people of color have a place there as well. It's very, very important to me.
Wow. And what does RevGenius do as a company?
Yeah, so RevGenius is a community, an online community for sales, marketing, CS, RevOps professionals, all revenue professionals. And it's somewhere where we can empower, inspire, and grow together. And so we have the community, which is free right now, and we're working on a lot of other really cool things. But you can go to the community and be a part of that. We have a lot of webinars, and events and networking, lots of cool things.
Cool. Thanks. Dwamian?
Yeah. Thank you again, Michelle, Jasmine, for having me. Asia, it's always cool to be on a podcast with you because I know you're sort of RevOps royalty right now. So yes, I'm Dwamian McLeish. I'm the CEO of a company called Junction. We're a seed stage startup out of Austin, Texas. And we help companies build their revenue by aligning people, purpose, process, and performance. It sounds like a mouthful, but it's essentially what we do is we build a technology platform that helps revenue professionals manage their data and then view operational specific metrics to help them, grow and make their company better.
So how did y'all get started in RevOps? Was it one of these titles that you kind of stumbled into once you started your professional career?
Yeah. So, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, you go first.
Yeah. So, I was an operations manager and like in the traditional sense of the word, like genetically super enhanced administrative assistant. And like, I was there to fill a role. At the end of the day, it's like, this is what we need help with. I'm like, cool. But I had a background in marketing and analytics. And so they saw a way to edge me into that role, as they continued to grow out their sales team. And so what my role primarily looks like was, like sales ops. It's supporting the sales team, sales enablement from the standpoint of their technology, admin of their entire tech stack. And so that was like my real introduction. And then as I continue to expand my knowledge and, kind of take on some other trainings, I fully started to grasp what RevOps was, which I think was which some companies are calling sales ops, is what other companies are calling RevOps, whereas I think RevOps is a lot more along the lines of what Dwamian and Asia does. But there's that aspect of RevOps, which is sales ops, and that's where I fit in at my last organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so I started my career in finance, sort of, and I mean that because I don't have a finance background, but my very first internship was a finance and accounting internship. And then I had a couple roles after that were semi-finance analysis. So I didn't sit on the finance team, but I was helping with forecasting and budgeting and journal entries, all of this really stuff to me that's not quite so interesting. Mm-hmm. And then I pivoted into tech. And before that, I was in operations for an agricultural company. And so what operations meant there was contract management, workflow design, helping choose a project lifecycle management tool. So tooling starts to come in systems. And then I went to a tech company in San Francisco, and I sat on the business operations team. And I would say that business operations is the closest thing to what I'm doing now as revenue operations, because we supported the entire company. A large component of that was sales, CS, and marketing. And then sales, that's where my introduction to Salesforce came in. And so I think that's where people are starting to get RevOps is Salesforce admin, or sales ops is Salesforce admin, when there's really so much more to it than just configuring this tool. So anyway, I was there for almost 2 years. And then I went to New Relic, which is a large tech company. And I had the idea that I kind of wanted to go strictly into a more analytical role. And I realized that I didn't want to do that. And it was by chance. I ended up getting laid off during the pandemic. I had a baby. So I was like, okay, this is it sucks, but the timing is not terrible. After that, I decided I wanted to go back into an operational role, because what I love about operations is how fast-paced it is, how different it is, and how you get to build stuff and work cross-functionally and connect people together. And so I was doing sales ops at Postal. And what happened is I kept getting pulled in the marketing direction. So I was doing marketing operations. And then I'm like, wait a minute, well, what about customer success? What about the other side of our whole sales motion and all of the customer, from the beginning of the buyer's journey all the way through customer? What about that process? We didn't have one. So I'm like, we should also focus on that, because that's revenue generating as well. And so I was thinking, alignment wise, it's not really sales ops and it's not really marketing operations. It's really revenue operations. And the title to me at the time was sort of new. I'm like, I don't really know what revenue operations is. In my head, I thought I would be business operations, because that's revenue is the business. And so that's how I got involved and plugged into the community. I started following some RevOps influencers, if you will, and really inspirational people. But that's how I got my start and where I am today.
Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome background. I'm going to give you my short version of the story. So in my past role, I was one of the founders and the chief technology officer at a national fitness company based out of here in Austin, but we were in, I think at the time we were in 20 something states. And I was fortunate enough to have gotten in the company early. And so I was thrown into a lot of the strategic planning, the strategy of the company. I was involved in a lot of the business, but I was head of technology. I've always been obsessed with efficiency, just creating efficiency, not only for my engineering team, but across the company. And in the engineering team specifically, I started practicing what's called DevOps. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of DevOps. And so I got truly obsessed with DevOps and kind of putting that practice in place. And really, it's sort of the same thing. It's kind of aligning cross-functional roles, even outside of engineering, to make sure that you can deliver good software and good experiences for your customers. And so while at my last role, I got also obsessed with the operations outside of engineering, outside of the technology department, and started participating in how's marketing looking at the journey of the customer when they're doing marketing. How's our sales team, which we had a pretty large sales force, what are they doing in the ingestion process of the customer, and what's the experience that the customer have when they get there. The customer success team, I was pretty heavily involved in their workflows as well. And one of the beauties of the way that I was working with them is I got to work with the technology, because we built almost all of our operational technology at that role, and got a chance to help design sort of like the movement of the customer and the customer's revenue across the organization. Now, obviously at the time, nobody was calling revenue operations, right? We all just thought that we were trying to create operational excellence. And in about 2019, I decided, I'm noticing a trend here. There's lots of data, tooling, people, processes, the alignment of, we were practicing OKR, so the alignment of metrics across the organization that is interesting, because not a lot of people outside of our organization, at least not what I was talking to, were doing it the way that we were doing, and didn't have the tools to do it. So I said, I'm going to leave, or I exited from my company after a few months deliberation with my partners, and started the company that I'm running now, called Junction. And many would say that any person who does a startup is a sadist, because it's crazy and it's hard. But in doing the startup, I got introduced to the revenue operations community, which seemed to align perfectly with all of the things that I set out to do, and the mission that I actually set out to accomplish with the company. And being inspired by people like Asia and some others in the community. And we deal very much in the data side of things, but the whole process of looking at the all the inflection points, the journey of the customer, i.e. your revenue across the organization, has been really interesting. And so that's how, from like the sort of, that's the genesis of where I started, and now squarely calling it revenue operations, and doing optimizations across the organization is what I'm living for.
I love how each of you mentioned the transferable skills and I guess cross functions, whether it was with the current job or your next job. But what do you think would be probably the top 3 to 5 skills they probably already have it, right? I just want you to kind of point it out to them if they want to explore this career opportunity.
Well, since I'm unmuted already, I can jump in if you don't mind. Personally, I think you have to have some sort of obsession with creating efficiencies across, both departments or teams or entire organizations, because I feel like, what you're trying to do, especially in revenue operations, is to remove the bottlenecks that cause the company to not make revenue as fast as it should, or to stop good experiences for customers who are going through that revenue life cycle. And so you have to sort of start with this obsession of, I want to make this experience, thus the movement of revenue through the organization, better. And the second I think is an obvious one, is you have to be a team player. Like, you have to be able to communicate with the team well. And so I've seen people who have been doing project management because they understand sort of like cross-functional operations move really quickly in this role. But I think those 2 skills are sort of like my top 2 that I think, if you have those in any role, and literally the role could be anything. Again, I'm coming from engineering. If you have that obsession and you can talk and behave or operate cross-functionally, I think those are the 2 fundamental things.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you said project management sort of skills, because that's critical to being successful at revenue operations, the technical skills like Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever tool you use, there's lots of people you can lean on, and there are a lot of like onboarding materials that you can use to learn those tools. But being able to develop a plan to execute on like this goal and flesh it out as a project and then communicate with everybody about it is so important. It's more important, in my opinion, than knowing Salesforce or report, or like knowing Tableau, for example, knowing SQL. I see that still in a lot of job application or in a lot of job postings. And I'll tell you right now that I don't use SQL. And so it's good to have. And I think technical skills are important, like not that they aren't, but if you want to go into RevOps and you don't have a background in like SQL or coding, or you're not a Salesforce admin certified and been using Salesforce for 5 years, don't let that stop you, because you can still do a lot if you bring those project management skills, the ability to work cross-functionally, the like softer skills of, can you be okay with things moving fast and a lot of things being thrown at you all at once? Then I think you're good to go. And then sure, learn Salesforce, learn HubSpot. Like those are be sort of familiar with the GTM tech stack. But if I had to choose, I would say project management is the most important thing.
Yeah. And I would just add on to the things that they were saying. I think being a good process thinker and person who documents things is really important. I feel like in my last role, that was probably one of the key things where there was a gap, because of course, there's a team that existed before you, and the way they did things was like built on an archaic product, their experience. And now you have to like move it forward. So being able to enable the team to be able to adapt to how things are going to go now. The project management piece, I think, is important, because organizationally, you need to think about, how to make this thing work the best way possible, and get people to adapt and move forward with it, and not be like so beholden to what they used to do, even though it's broken and it's a terrible experience for the customer. And I think some of those are maybe like soft skills. And I think for me also empathy, and thinking about like there was also a large portion of my job that was CS. And so like thinking about like what happens when this person comes to the website, what happens when they get to these different steps, and like what are the handoffs look like, so that you as a company or as a RevOps practitioner can try to change the experience to make it more fluid. Because I think because of the silos, you have like this jacked up, janky experience as that's what you deliver to your customer, which in turn causes them to churn, which is a revenue operations problem. And so there's like some of these other skills that I think, are soft skills that I think would be helpful in helping you to be successful in moving your revenue operations practice forward.
A lot of good points. I know last year I had started studying for the project manager certification, and that was, I put the book down, but I'm just wondering, are there any courses or certifications that would be helpful? I know some of y'all mentioned, just finding the community, right? And learning and growing your career that way. So if you can drop some of those resources, courses, certifications, communities, anything of that nature.
I'm gonna just say call Asia. That's like a great like, man, everything is on fire. Call Asia.
We're gonna have
but like there's a few that I really like, but really I don't think it's the community. It's like individual people that I found in a community. And I feel like I found Asia primarily in RevOps Co-op. And then, of course, I saw her content on LinkedIn, and like we just hit it off and took it from there. But there's like RevGenius, where Asia works. Revenue Collective, which has they have an associate. If you're like more of a junior RevOps practitioner, if you're like a VP or more, you can go to their. I think actually it's now called Pavilion. They have like their regular membership when you're more executive level. But really, it hasn't been like the community itself. It's been really critical for me to find a person who can serve as a mentor.
Yeah.
To help me, because my problems weren't like surfaced and like, hey, I just want a job, which I feel like a lot of the communities are like, I'm looking for a job. And, just I want to be in the in crowd, not necessarily like I need practical help on this internal struggle that I'm having. And so find your people within the community. Self-Sacker was cool because they have like these roundtables where I've met a couple of people where we've had like these kind of like work sessions where you bring, like, I'm bringing a problem. I don't really know how to migrate from Salesforce to HubSpot. What are you doing? Or what's the next transition from this tool to this tool, where you can get recommendations. So I would say that would be helpful, especially for a very, very new RevOps practitioner who hasn't, like, who maybe, especially on the tech side, all of this stuff is new. You need somebody to kind of like help you think through what to do or what processes to set up to make things flow better at your org.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it has been a challenge, actually. There's not really a RevOps community, and that's something that's really important to me. And that's something I'm really like gung-ho about at RevGenius is there isn't a community. There isn't a collection of resources. There isn't a like thing that we can say, go here. This is where you can get all your information. I did similar to Jasmine. Like, I found some people who I was like, these are really credible people. I can learn a lot from them on LinkedIn. Then I looked in some of the communities. Sales Hacker, yeah, they have the roundtables. Those aren't often though, and there's not a lot there yet. And then I went to Google a lot. I just went to my good friend Google, but that doesn't replace like the aspect of community and being able to come together like this with other people and say, hey, we're having these RevOps challenges, like let's powwow on them. Or just like, here's something that if you're just starting out, like outside of or like project management for RevOps 101, like great. Where was that when I started? You know what I mean? And so there's a gap there. And we need to fill it.
Don't tempt me. I need to start something new, girl.
I know. I'm saying, and so it's like it's rough. It's rough. The RevOps Co-op. So I joined that community. They're run by Funnel IQ, which is a tool for RevOps people. But yeah, I think the important and RevGenius, and we have a RevOps section there, and part of what I'm like focused on doing is building that out and building that up so that we can have like a space to come say, hey, come to this part, RevGenius. We're all RevOps people. Let's powwow about things. But yeah, I have relied a lot on Google, on YouTube, on LinkedIn. And I will ask and participate in the communities, or I'll tap people. I'm like, hey, do you have a second for me? I have this thing. I have this thing. And wherever I can, if someone has questions, I'm like, you put some time on my calendar. If I have time, I will try to help you.
Cool. So how does marketing operations fit into the RevOps function?
Yeah, I would say that it's a subset of revenue operations. When I was at Postal, when I was being pulled in all these directions, I was trying not to think of it as, okay, this is for sales, this is for marketing, this is marketing ops, this is for CS, this is CS ops. Rather, I tried to look at it as one like continuum. Okay, all of these pieces of the customer or the buyer through the customer journey. All right, here are the teams that support them. Okay, and then what am I doing if it's a marketing thing, and operationally, yes, it's technically falls under marketing, but for all the downstream impacts in our system, like Salesforce and HubSpot and whatever, our product. And then here are all the impacts to the people and to the customer. So the way I think of marketing operations is it's a piece of revenue operations. And it's an important piece. And if you're doing revenue operations, I challenge you to think like wherever you are you truly, is it truly revenue operations, or are you like doing one thing, which is also okay, by the way. All of those pieces are important, but I think titles are important for alignment reasons. That's just me, though.
Yeah, I can jump in here. So first of all, I think I do agree with Asia. I think that marketing operations should think of itself as a subset of the entire operational goals of the company. But with that said, I do think that they can actually be mutually exclusive and coexist. And I'll explain it this way. If you're looking at the entirety of how revenue moves throughout your organization, it has to go through, the whole life cycle. A lead, if I'm talking about a customer, a lead will turn into, or a prospect will turn into a lead, and that lead will turn into, like, you'll give demos or whatever it is that your selling process is, and they'll turn into a customer at some point, and then they'll be a customer until they churn, right? Those go through different departments. And if you're looking at the entirety of the cycle, what revenue operations job is to make sure that the transitions that happen and the data that comes with it is smooth, and to keep that customer a customer for as long as possible. The outcome of that is either sustained revenue or increased revenue, right? So that's like the big neon sign that everybody is aligning to. Are we making money here, or are we losing money, right? Now, how you get there most of the time has to be sort of like micro processes within the department. Not necessarily that they're going to be breaking away from the entire revenue operations process, but there are micro processes that happen in order to support the overall goal of keeping or generating revenue. And a lot of times, marketing operations can coexist to keep the processes within the department flowing, in terms of producing what they need to produce in order to support the overall goal. So I believe that it's just, the microprocesses that happen in marketing it has supporting roles that contribute to the overall revenue operations process, but they can be different.
I know probably 10 to 15 years ago, I realized marketing was changing because marketing and sales were coming together. Mm-hmm. So do you feel like, and please call me out, but listening to you, I feel like RevOps is the baby of marketing and sales departments merging.
I personally think it might have come from sales. I think, sales drives a lot of things in a lot of organizations. I mean, money makers, especially the word revenue in there, tend to want to try to optimize the way that they make money, or they make commissions, or they because at the end of the day, that's what a lot of companies measure their success on is how much can they sell. Nobody ever really goes downstream and look, how much are you retaining, or how much are we bringing in at the, like the marketing qualified leads, the sales qualified leads, all those different metrics that kind of support it. So I think it actually probably started from sales ops, but I don't know that for sure. I think it did. But Asia, Jasmine, what are some of your thoughts there? Because I think that's where it came from.
I think, honestly, I feel like it came out of the business operations side of things. Because that's where I sat. I was sitting in business operations, supporting mostly sales and marketing and customer success, but also other areas of the business like HR and finance and legal. But I really feel that this last year, everyone being home and virtual and on LinkedIn, this one word got scooped up as a hot buzzword. And then everyone's like, oh yeah, RevOps. What is RevOps? It's just sales ops rebranded, or it's just Salesforce admin, or it's sales and marketing. Like now this is changing. And so we've got to get together revenue operations. Like maybe a somewhat controversial opinion, but that's how I feel about it. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's happy accident that happened. But that,
yeah,
there's all this buzz around.
Yeah, it was like all of a sudden. Yeah, it was like all of a sudden I'm like RevOps, and like this is like a word that I had heard about. I want to say like middle of 2020, to be honest. And so I feel like you, Asia, in my operations role, I was, supporting finance and accounting and all these like business operations themes. And then that's where there was like this gap to start to kind of focus more on supporting the sales team. But to Michelle's point, I do think that that's where the emphasis and focus are on, at least at, some of the organizations that I speak to, is usually like sales and marketing. But what I hate hearing, or like I feel like it's a misnomer, everybody's talking about sales and marketing, but if RevOps is really going to do what it's supposed to do, it needs to think about customer success as well. I know Dwamian had mentioned, kind of like downstreams and renewals and those type of things, but it's like, it's not RevOps to me unless you include that, because you're not looking at that impact on the bottom line.
100%.
So otherwise it's just sales ops or marketing ops, and you just calling it RevOps, and there's still very disjointed functions that are not helping anybody.
I agree.
Yeah.
100%. And I think probably.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it's we're in the B2B SaaS space, but I think that this is transferable to other industries as well, especially ones that have heavy operational components, like, I don't know, manufacturing or shipping and logistics, that are really like supply chain type things. So anyway,
and really quick, I'll just say one last thing here. So I believe that, Jasmine, I 100% agree with you. Sales, marketing, customer success, finance has to be in part of the process. I mean, the entire, like if you look at the entire value stream of how you make money, how you retain it, how you lose it, how you report on it, has to include a lot of those departments, right? I believe that even though we don't know where the term came from, it is, I think, a natural evolution of the X ops that's been happening, right? For example, marketing ops, I don't think people realize that marketing ops and sales ops actually existed before the word DevOps became a buzzword. And DevOps, by the way, is really just figuring out a way to ship your software by involving a lot of the cross-functional teams that are involved in the development of that software, removing bottlenecks at different workstations. The workstation could be the planning, the coding, the marketing, and then the shipping, and then creating a feedback loop that allows you to figure out how to keep it optimized and even make it faster, right? And so you bring in a lot of software, you bring in a lot of processes, and you change things culturally in order to have that optimized movement of shipping software. And the same thing, marketing operations, sales operation were doing. Sales operation wanted to figure out how to bring in, leads and turn them into true prospects, and then how to turn them into customers and how to keep them for as long as possible. And so they created a way, even though it was still within marketing, to remove the barriers of the sub departments or the value streams within marketing to make it move faster in marketing, right? And so it was a natural evolution for somebody to say, well, we want this type of optimization across the entire organization. And the way that we know how things are moving in any organization is look at the bottom line. And the bottom line is the revenue. And so it seemed natural for us to transition into an environment where cross-functional teams participate in generating and keeping revenue, which I think is how revenue operations was born. And that's why I said it probably came from sales, because they're the ones who are always thinking, how can we generate revenue? But it was a natural progression from all the other XOps that I think that are out there.
I think each of you bring a good point. And I think Jasmine says something about this title coming up to the forefront last year because of the pandemic. Because I think, well, one, it's a global pandemic, right? So individuals and businesses literally stopped. Like, for the most part, revenue stopped right? So it wasn't that, oh, well, we had a drop in sales because I'm in Houston, Texas, by the way. So it wasn't, oh, we had a drop in sales because, we flooded or there was a hurricane, but then you have other things that are still working for you. It's like everything just halted. Like, so there's no revenue whatsoever that's coming in. So I think that's kind of maybe highlighted some things, bringing it to the forefront. And then Asia made some good points about logistics. I've been car shopping lately. So there's a shortage of cars, right? And it's like they're missing parts. So they're not making cars because one manufacturer in China that makes a single part they're not producing or whatever. So it's like nothing's being done. So I'm not into cars like that, but it would be interesting to see how much money is generated from these car companies at the end of the year because of the shortage. Because pretty much of the side effects of not making any money from almost 12 to 18 months ago.
Yeah, I wonder, just kind of you bringing up the pandemic and kind of like the supply chain breakdown. I mean, I don't know who became like the head of the, these discussions on RevOps specifically, but I mean, I think part of what RevOps is, when you're talking about like the alignment of people, that possibly changed because now teams were more distributed or needed to onboard new tools to manage like the customer lifecycle because everything's online now. Like there's probably a bunch of different contributing factors to how it got here. But now that it is here and now that organizations are a little bit more open to talking about it, I think, it's still very fluid. And I think everybody is still trying to figure out like what works best for their org, but they also will have to, I think it might be too early to kind of like standardize some things because I think everybody is still trying to figure it out. Like when people ask me what's RevOps, like sometimes the honest answer is like, I don't know. It's like, because every organization I took, they approach it different. There's not these like standard, this is how it always should be done because there's no standard tools. There's no standard way of kind of like how people are, managing the entire customer life cycle. So I still think there's a lot of like growth and opportunity and movement to it. And right now, just, I would even say like in terms of content, some of it is a lot of fluff to where I don't know that I'm growing in the space because of it. It is really down to me just kind of figuring out things as I approach new challenges that come up in my role.
Yeah, Jasmine, I think you're right. I think that there's a lot of fluff content that's being generated from it. But, for me, I have to take it back to the root purpose, which is to create efficiency in the movement of your revenue across your organization, essentially just breaking down your value stream and seeing where you need to create efficiencies, remove bottlenecks, and then optimize from there, right? So it's really important that if you're in the sales department, the marketing department, the customer success department, or the finance department, that you have the same definitions for the metrics across your organization, and then use the same information to calculate those metrics, right? And for example, you might have a marketing team that's really, really excited about their marketing qualified leads. They send, they get those over to sales. Those are supposed to now be sales qualified leads. And then the reporting of the attributes that support those two things are relatively different in order to generate the same number, right? And so if marketing is using their own set of numbers, and then sales is using their own set of numbers to generate these numbers that are supposed to drive the company forward, then who's right and who's wrong, right? And so revenue operations is supposed to come in and say, hey, let's standardize how we, what we're tracking, how we're tracking it, how we're going to calculate it, and then have an agreement that when we see movement in that number, that we either did something that's working or we need to do something that needs to work a little bit better, right? And so revenue operations to me is really just that. It's kind of pushing revenue through the cycle and optimizing it through the values through the workstations to make sure that at the end of the day, what everybody wants is to make money.
Right. I think that's probably like a really succinct way of putting it. Like, this is how we make stuff work right at this organization. And so one of the things that I was thinking about as you were speaking was also kind of like the need for data transparency, because I think a lot of things that like we don't even know about bottlenecks because nothing is being measured.
Right.
And so you can't make it more efficient if you're just throwing stuff at the wall. And I think that's where I've seen RevOps really uncover some things, is because now we're putting in, like some things like conversion tracking or, time to close ratio, or like some things where you can really understand some of the customer touch points. But before it was like sales had this data and marketing had this data, or there was data on the platform, but not in this system. And so I think, in addition to just kind of like these overarching concepts, it breaks down to like, how do not only do the people talk to each other and communicate the same values, but like even your data, like get the data, but then make sure the data is like the data integrity and making sure it's accurate and all of those things. So that too is RevOps. So like there's all these little pieces that I think contribute to it. But what I literally hear most of the time is like Salesforce admin. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm glad I know how to do that. That's cool. Now what?
It is not just that at all. I agree with data. I feel like, to be fair with a lot of organizations, there weren't a lot of ways to manage data, to make it transparent, as you put it, in the past, at least not easy ways, right? And so there are a lot of startups now that are working on that for companies, and I think that's really exciting. For me, more than accuracy of data, and data should be accurate because that's how you get a good picture, is consistency. Because in order to measure change in something, in order to affect you doing something to optimize it, you have to be able to to rely on the data consistency, because if the data is accurate and it's inaccurate and it's inaccurate all the time, as long as you can see movement from it, there's something to be said there, right? You want it to be accurate, but you want to be able to see movement from consistent data. And I think that lots of companies don't have consistent data because marketing has their own set of data. Sales has their own set of data. Customer success have their own set of data. So there's no consistency. There's no reliability. And so you can't track anything. You can't optimize anything. You can't, Asia and I love to use this word, you can't create feedback loops that allow you to know how to optimize the value stream. And that's, where I believe revenue operation comes in to standardize that across the organization.
So many good points. You have my mind like going all over the place. And Dwamian, you actually it's like you read my mind because you answered my question, but I want to put it out there anyways. What are aspects of RevOps that marketing agency owners can start to utilize, right? From foundational to building, right? Because I believe one of my purpose is, I believe in the economic development of Black people, right? And so that comes in different vehicles. So we're trying to go from small business to generational wealth, okay? So when it comes to RevOps, just give it to me, like foundational stuff to high level Facebook, Google, Amazon, your expertise on what we need to implement and build into.
I love this.
I don't know if you were specifically asking me to jump in here, but I'm happy to start out. So first of all,
everyone.
Yeah, I think this revenue operations reality that we're living right now should be the sort of like the pin in time that says that culturally companies need to change the way that they think about their processes and their revenue, from when they're a startup to when they're a gigantic IPO company, right? Or whatever else is there beyond that. As a startup, a business owner myself, one of the things that I believe that a lot of people don't do, especially in the start, is to think about their company as it will exist in the future. And so people push off this idea of practicing, revenue operations, or again, let's get rid of the buzzword of practicing data transparency and process optimization from the very start to later on in the life cycle of their company. And so they end up sort of scrambling to kind of put the pieces back together, which is when you end up with inaccurate data and sort of have to go to, okay, is the data at least consistent, right? And so for me, as Black business owners, as minority business owners, we have to start thinking about our companies in the future as a big company and start culturally putting in place the things that we know we need to do to create that transparency and those feedback loops in every stage of our business, because I think that's how companies are going to look in the future. So we have to start doing that now, right? And then we have to start accepting that. I mean, for the most part, we're starting with a little bit of deficit, right? So we have a little bit of money to play with to say, all right, I'm a firm believer of this. When you have nothing to lose, you're willing to take the risks. And so build it into the culture, start from today, and, in building it, think about what your company is going to look like in the future, because that's you're building towards that.
I'll chime in and saying, and thinking about the future, you gotta kind of plan economically to spend on the things that's going to help you to do to run this company efficiently. And I feel like, for the past over a decade that I've worked with small Black-owned businesses, it's like basic stuff, like tools, like they want to just use MailChimp. Like that's the only thing, and because it's free. And I think I understand kind of starting from somewhere, but I think once you kind of increase your revenue, to add like some type of tools that are monitoring your analytics, like, or pay somebody to get your analytics set up so you are measuring something. Mm-hmm. I think, one of the things that we struggle with is like just working in our business and like delivering service, but not really understanding what's going on the back end. And so if you're building for the future, you kind of need to at least start with like some basic, like even if it's like Google Sheets or documentation or Google Docs, like have some type of, like he said, like a pin in time of like how things are performing for you. There are a lot of free tools, so I think you can still do some measurement and some process improvement, or like have some back end stuff in order really early on as a company that may not be generating revenue, but that part has to be prioritized. And I know with the many different hats Black businesses wear, especially if they're solopreneurs, it's like, now I gotta understand like how things will work from a numerical, like quantitative thing. Like, well, yeah, I think, yeah, you should. And I think that's a way that you get to start to grow a business to something that turns into a real enterprise, rather than, we just making 100K and we're satisfied with that.
I think that it's really important for us to go to the community to figure out how to do this. Go to the community and say, here's how you do that, because it's important to have people who look like you help you too. I think, like, at the end of the day, like Jeff Ignacio is great, but if there was Jasmine Powers when I was like starting out, I would have been like, if she's speaking and she's saying, here's how you do RevOps 101 for your small business, like that speaks to the community, and then they're more likely to do those things, right? Like, so I think that's on us to do.
Yeah.
And I want to do that. That's really important.
Yeah,
I feel start like, with Google Sheets. Let's build yourself a little model. You can build a model with Google Sheets.
Right, like some type of dashboard. It has to be something that's like low barrier to entry.
Exactly.
I also think that we're kind of spoiled by like this coaching, consulting thing, Facebook. I mean, I'm a coach and consultant, so I feel like I'm also a part of that. But like, there's so many marketing and solutions for like these point solutions and these like magic secrets to great business success. And so that's what people are shopping for. Like these one, like if you just learn this Facebook ads course, then now you are going to be rich. And that's the only thing they'll focus on, rather than like, there's this entire campaign you need to be thinking about. Or like, it's not just Facebooks that you need this and like a CRM to like manage, your incoming leads. It's like all these other things. I think maybe to talk about it would be like overwhelming to an entrepreneur, but it also is like the reality to running a successful small business. So yeah, a RevOps 101, or just somebody who's, honest enough to say, hey, yeah, we can do point solutions, but this is a whole entire business. And so this is how you can look at these things and go along through this incrementally. Asia, Dwamian, we need a course.
Yeah, no, that's really, really important to me. And it's not like a one-off thing. Like, this is continuous. It's going out into the community and advocating, and then amplifying the voices of the community. And so, if there were resources for me, I'm always like looking, who can I go listen to who's looks more like me? Because you look at the space and it looks the same.
I think we're there. I really think that we're there, but we're not being invited or amplified per se. So like, maybe we don't know who's there. Like, for example, you weren't the first voice. Like, I saw your name, but I didn't know who Asia Corbett was until after I had heard about Matt Vaughn, or after I heard about Jeff Ignazio. Right. And it wasn't in like all the conferences and like the panels that each of these platforms and communities, it, is really homogenous. And like, I welcome their feedback as well. But I think that there's like we're these underliers in the background working and doing the roles, but maybe it's introversion that's not making us be as vocal. I don't know. I can't begin to explain why it is, but I think there are people that are knowledgeable, that are people of color who can do this, but they're not on the forefront of the conversations. Like, I don't know how I got on that 36 revenue operations leaders to follow, but because I know there's, not to down myself, but there's so many other people that I know are doing similar type of work, but they're just cogs in a wheel. Like, you don't see them on any of the panels.
I think we know why it is, but
well, I'm trying to be diplomatic.
I think we know why that is. And that is something that I am like 200% invested in changing. It's very, very, very important to me. I've got siblings who look up to me. My son is going to be seen as a Black man when he grows up. These are all things that matter to me, and making sure that they all have seats at the table, making sure that they have those opportunities, because we could wait for things to change, or we could start pushing. And that is what I haven't been doing in the past. Like, I've been very comfortable because I come from, some privilege, but I want that to change. And so here's a way how I can help do that. I'm going to do it, whatever that means.
Yeah. I think, like, I'll just say this, since you kind of went there, we have to have the same, what they say, same confidence as a mediocre white man. That's a terrible thing to say, but I still feel like there's a lot of like mediocrity that's like, we all that. And I'm like, oh, like, so then get some of that and just know that you know your stuff.
Exactly. Yep.
I think maybe like come out of the shells and like create a personal brand. I think that might just be it, like creating personal brands. And maybe, that doesn't mean necessarily that now you have to create Black RevOps leaders. I think, that can happen, but it could be you just being very vocal in the spaces you already exist and not being afraid to like deviate from your company's brand, because you're going to move companies. So you need to like Asia Corbett, I am, the Revenator. Like something that like that can follow you no matter where you go. But I think that's part of it is like, it's people that just be quiet. Cause like we have coworkers,
Exactly.
So we know there's other experts, but it's only like the top 5 that you're going to see that are being tagged in every post, which some of that I think is like, they just trying to boost each other's LinkedIn posts, but still, you know what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What's funny is the sole reason I started to posting more on LinkedIn is because I found a gap in like the kind of knowledge I was looking for. Like, okay, what could I do today to make my RevOps function a little better immediately? And so that's why I started posting. Literally, that's it. And somehow the LinkedIn algorithm caught me, and here I am. But like, I wanted one other person to say, hey, yeah, that helped me.
Yeah.
And if I told myself if that happens, then I did my job outside of my job. And it happened. And so, now my goal, and I talked to Hannah Jakova about this too, is like, whenever I have the opportunity, I'm going to, like, whatever that means, I'm going to lift you up. I'm going to put you have a seat at the table. And so part of that is me also trying to find other people in the community who look like us.
Yeah.
And get us into these speaking engagements or like interviews, so that you're talked about in an article, your voice is heard. Because you're right, Jasmine, there's so many other people out there. Where are they?
Yeah. Representation matters in all facets of life.
It does.
Yeah. I truly believe that too. I think, society has a way of continuing, how people feel about themselves and what they learn and who they learn it from.
Yeah.
With the education system, right? Whether it's in an official school, a college, or in somebody's house, education even is not just academic. It's about who's actually providing that education. And right now, I think that you're right. As Black people, we're not representing ourselves well in the revenue operations space, and letting people know that there is the opportunity for them to also be involved in the communities that we're already in and the commentary that we're already having. And so we do have to step up and cause people to see that a little bit more. And it's, as you said, it's on us, especially with such an early practice in revenue operations.
Yeah, we have an opportunity here. I feel very grateful that I have the opportunity to do this work for the community. So I'm all in. I'm 100, and that's another reason I left Postal. Is like, I can't do this there.
Yeah,
I was one Black person in the entire company of like 50 people. They kept hiring people out of. I mean, they're fine. There's nothing wrong with them, but it's like, why don't we look? I went to Cal State, East Bay. There were a lot of Black people who went to my school. Like, why don't we look at other places and other areas? So, I mean, I could go on about this too. It's another thing I'm feel strongly about. But.
It's been a complete pleasure. I want to thank each of you for your contribution on this show. Before you go, if you can just maybe drop your website, Instagram, LinkedIn, how can people contact you?
Yes.
I'm at JasminePowers.com.
My LinkedIn is just my name, but I'll drop it into the chat. I'll drop it in there. And I encourage you to join RevGenius too. And I want our numbers to be strong. I want us to have this space in this community and me advocate for it and for us. So,
all right.
I'll drop.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for the invite. The discussion was fascinating. I dropped my LinkedIn in the chat as well. Thanks again, Jasmine, for inviting me, Michelle for hosting me, and Asia for being here again. I know y'all are super busy, so it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Dwamian. Thank you. Bye. Thanks, Michelle. Bye, Asia.
Thank you for listening to Marketing for the Culture podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe, whether it's on Apple, Google, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. And of course, our videos are on YouTube. If you have a moment, feel free to give us a rate, review, or just comment. We appreciate our sponsors for their continuous support. Also, if you're interested in learning more about our sponsors or becoming a member of the African American Marketing Association, visit aa-ma.org.